Joining me now is Jonathan Downey, restaurateur and founder of the food and market company London Union. Jonathan, good to see you. Is this the news you were waiting for?
Yeah, we've been waiting a while now for this, but it's very welcome news. I'm a little surprised that we've not seen the guidance yet, and so we're not getting too excited. It's good news for some hospitality, but not all. And there's a lot of people that are still waiting to hear whether they can open. For instance, we're told that only drinking and eating is allowed if you're sat down, and this may require table service. So there's a lot of venues that won't be allowed to open under the current guidance that we've heard from the Prime Minister today. We'll know more when we read the guidance in detail. Yeah,
and I guess you need that guidance in detail pretty quickly, because that could determine how much you're going to have to spend to get ready for all this.
Exactly. I mean, some places have been preparing for this for a while now, and they know what to expect. But even with the reduction to 1 metre distancing, I think we're probably only going to see maybe 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 hospitality venues open, because we've only been given 10 days notice, which is just not enough time for many of us to get ready to operate, to get our people back from furlough. I mean, a lot of people, especially in cities like London, a lot of our employees are EU nationals, and they're on the beach in Greece or back home in Spain or wherever it is. And we need to get people back at work as soon as we can. But all that will start to happen now. It's a little disappointing that some of our colleagues in nightclubs and some of the leisure sector, like bowling alleys, won't be allowed to open yet. But hopefully, if the first few weeks of this relaxation work out well, then they'll be back in business too soon.
Yeah, and Jonathan, for those restaurants that do open, give us a sense of what you think that experience will be like for the customer. What will be the sort of new experience in restaurants? What do we have to get used to?
Well, I think we're going to have to get used to half-empty restaurants for starters. That's one of the big concerns for people in the industry. There's still a big fear of the virus and a concern about going out, and we need to do something to try and convince the public that restaurants, pubs and bars are safe places to be, and that we're taking all the measures necessary we can in terms of infection control. We're going to need some support from the government with financial support to see us through this. And I think that we're going to see, unfortunately, we're going to see waitstaff in visors and face masks in some venues. I heard that Wagamama were doing that, and I think that's probably a good thing in some cases, because it will reassure the public that businesses are taking the right measures. But I hope that we'll be able to move on from that quite soon and get back to some kind of normal, because, you know, people are going out for the atmosphere and the entertainment, and they don't really want to be in a clinical environment, and that's going to be very off-putting for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and it could be reassuring, as you said, for some people, but for others, you know, half-empty restaurant and those measures you're talking about may be off-putting. Maybe people will be very reluctant to take the risk very quickly, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a while. I think if you're outside, you're going to be okay. And I think most people understand that now. There are very few, almost no examples of the infection happening when you're outside. So that's going to be fine. But inside, we're going to have some big empty spaces, and it's going to be a slow process to fill those up as we continue through the summer, as we continue through this virus, and continue to flatten the fear in the same way that we flattened the curve at the beginning of all this.
Yeah, and what about the staff, Jonathan? Some will be worried, no doubt, because I suppose it's difficult to avoid close contact in kitchens and around the sort of tills and around the bar. I mean, how do you think they will think about this?
Well, our staff are fundamental. I mean, over 3 million people employed by hospitality. We're really good at looking after people front of house. We're getting even better at looking after people back of house during this crisis. We know about the PPE. We've got government guidelines on what making a business COVID secure means. We'll do everything we can. Anybody that's vulnerable or susceptible to this virus won't be expected to come back to work. You know, I think generally we're very good employers, and I hope that continues throughout this. And unfortunately, a lot of people won't ever be coming back to work in hospitality, because so many jobs are already lost because of this. But those that do, we'll make sure they're properly taken care of, and we'll do everything we can to make sure they feel safe at work, and so that they can do their jobs properly, carefully, so that we can sanitize, so that we can clean as we go, so that we can turn tables safely, so that we can make customers feel welcome, and that we start to get back to some kind of profitability at some point in the near future.
Yeah, and you hinted at the beginning of this interview that there will be some places that can't open for various reasons, that maybe they're too small. There's a lot of restaurants and bars are very small and won't be able to open. Will they be requiring continued help from the government and expecting continued help from the government?
Yeah, I mean, I've got 5 venues in London. One of them is called Milk and Honey. It's a small bar in Soho. It's 165 capacity over 4 floors. We won't be able to open on July the 4th with a metre distancing. It just doesn't make commercial sense. And so we'll be waiting to see a relaxation in that at some point, hopefully by August. I also own a large venue in Shoreditch, which is 1,000 capacity. And again, metre distancing just won't work. And there's too much standing up, drinking and eating in that venue, which won't be allowed. And so we're waiting to see further relaxation. I think a lot of businesses are going to look at this guidance and decide it's probably not going to be worth it. We're going to need to see a change in outlook from the public. We're going to need to see new confidence from the public, because if you're a restaurant and you're opening at perhaps less than 80% occupancy, 80% capacity, you're going to be open and losing money, and that doesn't make much sense for very long. And so I think there's going to be a lot of us standing back and seeing how things go in the early days. There was some reports of busy queues outside IKEA and Primark I saw when non-essential retail opened, but I think I heard today that footfall in the West End of London, for instance, was 80% down on what it normally is. It's going to take a while for that to come back, and before all bars, restaurants and pubs that can survive through this open up again.
Do you think the government will be sympathetic to places that, like those you've just described, and extend furlough for them? And what about rental? Presumably you're still paying rent on these places and will have to continue to pay rent for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, well, we'd love to see furlough extended for those sectors of our industry that can't reopen on the 4th of July and may not be able to reopen until sometime next year. For instance, nightclubs may not be allowed to reopen for months yet. But you've hit the nail on the head. The biggest challenge for our industry now is rent. I've been campaigning for months now, calling for a national timeout on rents, a pause between the relationship of tenant, landlord and bankers. Landlords have had no help from government throughout this crisis. They need a debt repayment break for any borrowings they've made on premises that have got hospitality tenants in them that haven't been able to pay their rent. If we've been given an extension to the forfeiture moratorium to the end of September, but if that's not extended beyond 30 September, then we've got 9 months rent that will become due. And almost every single hospitality landlord is expecting payment in full. Some landlords have agreed to deferments across the whole of next year, but those bills are massive. They are mounting up, and businesses will not be able to pay them at the end of September. So we have to do something. Government has to do something, provide a legislative framework for landlords and tenants to agree a national rent-free deal and move towards a turnover rent. They've come out with a code of conduct that's voluntary at the moment. If that was mandatory, that would be fantastic. We could work through this. We could find a way through this together and hopefully start to make some money again next year, create new jobs and become rent-paying tenants for a long time yet.
OK, well, Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us today, and good luck when